Hey guys, I just want to set this up because this video you're about to watch or attempt to endure through, first off, has a lot of what I hope is very useful information when it comes to wet sanding, polishing, car paint scratch repair, car paint scratch removal. You can call it many things. But what I did is I shot this video and I decided to separate it into two videos because I interview the customer first, and I'll do my best to make a link of that other video so you can watch the intro of that. And that one has to do with communication skills and literally takes you through the talk track of the customer itself before I start working on this blue Tesla. But if you endure, there's a lot of information here. Hopefully it will help you out. Hope you learn something. And if you like what you're seeing, give it a thumbs up. And by all means, if you hate it, go for it. Thumbs down, and I don't care. And by the way, if you hate it, tell me why you hate it. And if you like it, tell me why you like it. And if you have some suggestions, by all means, let me know what those suggestions are. But try to not do it in a manner that muddies the water for the other viewers. Anyhow, let's get started. Let me pull you in and see if we can see or capture the scratch. We have the scratch that starts here, right next to this character line. So that will be a vulnerable area that I will have to protect. And the scratch, you can see that it is different degrees of damage, which means that it's different depths. Right here is not so deep, very subtle, more extreme all the way through here, subtle, extreme. So every scratch truly is different. So we've got this major one, a more subtle one, and then we have various ones throughout the car.
There is some right here too. So,
Where at?
right here. I think it's a scratch.
Yeah, actually you're right. And I'm now looking to see if
It goes like all the way up here.
you know what? Someone else tried to
Fix it?
because I can see all these
Oh yeah,
abrasion marks. And they're so inconsistent, I can tell they did not use a buffer to do it. So someone, and it could have been the dealership, very unlikely it was the customers, because I know the customers, they're not the do-it-yourselfer type. So this could have been done at the dealership, and they tried to just do it by hand, and they really did a piss poor job. So, but the fact that they did something now tells me that the clear coat has already been diminished or degraded. So I have to apply more caution, but it's subtle, so it's not going to take too much. For this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape off this character line. I'm going to wet sand and then buff it. Now the scratch goes right up to this character line, so I'm going to be very precise in how I lay this tape, because what I'm trying to do is lay it over the high point of that character line, so that when I sand, it's a non-issue as far as protection goes. This is a solution of mostly distilled water. I label it ONR, which stands for optimum no rinse. It just has a subtle amount of optimum no rinse in it. For me, it's just a good lubricant. Because it's distilled water, I don't have to worry about it water spotting in the sun, because if it does spot up, which it would, if I allow it to dry in the sun, it would wipe off very easily because the water's so pure. The ONR just adds a subtle amount of lubricant to it. I'm going to start with 1500 grit wet and dry sandpaper. I use it wet because as I'm sanding, it allows the spent material, the clear coat that I'm sanding away, to float away rather than clog up the sandpaper. I get this very wet because I want any dirt, debris, it's already been cleaned off, but that's just a caution that I take. This is a firm sanding block, but it's actually foam. It's just a firm foam. So it is still malleable.
So I'm just going to go back and forth, and I'm using a sanding block this time by hand rather than just by hand, because I want to sand a more uniformed manner. But really in this situation, it's such a non-issue. It's more about convenience, as in it's easy to wrap the sandpaper around the sanding block and just go back and forth rather than trying to configure my fingers behind the sandpaper and keep a uniformed, consistent pressure across a bigger area versus little areas of my fingertips, if that makes any sense at all. Now, I don't whip out a paint gauge because, once again, my goal is to keep as much clear coat as possible. If the customer had said, Darren, I don't care about the clear coat, I don't want the base coat to change color, but I don't care about the clear coat, I want that scratch gone, well, that's where I would need a paint gauge so that I could sand down to the very bottom of a clear coat without actually going through it and sanding away as much as possible and still retain a little amount of clear coat. Now what I do is I wipe and I get it to dry completely. Because what will happen is, now that I've abraded the crap out of the paint through the sandpaper, it will reveal how much of the scratch has either been diminished or it's basically just new information. Now I can feel it and say, okay, the edge has been diminished, but there's still an edge to it. And I have not sanded overly aggressively because there's still orange peel showing. So I know through experience that I can still sand some more. And the scratch down here, I've not sanded that at all. So now I'm going to sand this some more and then sand this. Now as far as pressure goes, it would be hard to say. It's just what I call medium pressure. I'm not bearing down on it too hard. I'm allowing the sandpaper itself to do its job, kind of like polish. Yes, I can force it to happen quicker, but I can also just go back and forth and allow the sandpaper to do its job, which will naturally cut into and shave away or sand away the material as I go back and forth. So the simple answer with polishing, compounding, wet sanding is that you're literally scratching your way to success. You start with aggressive scratches based on experience and how aggressive you feel you need to begin with, and then you graduate to finer sandpaper and then compound and then polish, and each step of the way you're putting finer and finer scratches into the paint to the point where once you're done polishing it and waxing it, the surface looks flawless. Under a microscope, you would see that it's not truly flawless based on how much you're going to enlarge it through the use of a microscope. But to the unaided eye, it will look flawless. I'm also going to sand this little area that someone else tried to fix subtly because I know it's already been worked on. So this is where I apply risk management, and I want to just diminish it a little bit before I hit this with the buffer. Now I'm going to wipe it, check results, and at this point, because this is 1500 grit, I could switch to 2500 grit and sand it further, but I'm going to whip out my rotary, and I know that my rotary is going to be able to cut through the sanding marks very quickly. Then I can switch from the rotary, which does the heavy lifting, to a DA to finish it off with any swirl marks or hologramming, whatever you prefer to call them. So that's as aggressive as I want to get. I'm blowing on it to speed up the drying process. I have removed more of the scratch itself. I've diminished the edge itself to a greater degree. Now I'm going to buff it and we'll see what we have left over. I'm also going to buff this because this has some hand polishing marks, which to me are just unacceptable. So I'm also going to buff this. I'm going to tape it off strategically, and we'll work our way towards success. Be polishing up here and down here. There's two ways I could attack this. I could tape this off and purely polish down, or strictly polish down here, or I can use some small tape, thinner tape, tape this off to protect the character line itself. I'm going to go even downgrade this tape itself and really strategize the moment. So this is a thinner piece of tape. So really, in a very thin manner, will separate the two areas, which is not a concern. My real concern is protecting this character line because it's a high point. It is prone to, damage when you introduce a buffer to this surface. So that's my main concern, is protecting this character line. Now, this is a shout out to Brian Horn. He sent me some last cut. It's by The Last Detail. Apparently it's made by a detailer for detailers. The little tagline says, "I detail every vehicle like it's my last." Okay, I can interpret that many ways, but it's a compelling tagline. So it's called The Last Cut by Jace Price. I've never used this before. I have no idea as to the results it can deliver. So, once again, starting with the rules, I read the directions or instructions on the back. Now I'm going to proceed with the instructions, and then I'm just going to tweak it or finesse it based on my personal experience. I'm using my Flex polisher, and by the way, all these links will be below the Show More box. I'm going to set my Flex polisher to setting 3, which is 1200 RPMs. It will not show on camera, but what I'm doing is I'm actually tilting the buffer slightly to catch the edge of the buffer. If I hold this completely flat, it will disperse all the friction to the entire pad itself. But if I raise it up, based on the degree I raise it up, it will concentrate that friction, which also builds up heat in the process, and it will work faster. So that's a little trick that you can use, because as a rule, you are taught to keep a buffer flat to the surface so as to prevent hologramming or swirl marks. But I know that this is not my final stage. What I want to do is cut to the chase. I know how to break the rules because I also know how to fix the rules that I have broken. This is how I cut to the chase in this moment, is I will go up on an edge and force more or quicker results from the pad choice itself, the speed setting, and the compound. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm only doing it subtly, but I wanted to explain it to you because it's not really going to show up on the camera because it's not overly dramatic as far as the angle in which I'm holding the buffer. And this is all the polish that I'm using. Yes, it's a used pad. You can get multiple uses out of a single pad. I don't have to overthink this moment. It's not a show car moment. This is a daily driver. We want the best results as possible, but we still want to maintain a realistic approach to it while still getting maximum outcome from it. for any beginner, you might be thinking, wow, he really allows that buffer to remain in one place, even though it is moving. I'm moving it rather slowly. That's because that's where experience comes in. I want, and I'm not using an aggressive form of pressure, and yes, we have the gardeners. It's like the universe aligns, the stars align, and I'm always gonna show up on the same day the gardener is. So what I want to happen is I want the buffer to do most of the work. Yes, I can finesse it and speed the process up by holding it at an angle, increasing the speed of the buffer, increasing the pressure. I can also do it and allow the buffer, the pad, and the compound to do its job, because I want to gracefully, for lack of a better word, or appropriately allow these materials and tools to do the work they're designed to do. I don't want to be so hasty as to force the situation, but experience will dictate that, and that's where you just hopefully can learn enough and see me doing this stuff to say like, oh, Darren will last this long with the buffer, set at this speed. I'm using minimal pressure. I would say approximately, I don't know, let's say 5 pounds of pressure at best. So once I do the initial cut, and you may have noticed I kind of hesitated and went over this area more, because as I'm polishing, I'm looking for two things. One, I'm making sure that all the sanding marks are being removed, but I'm also seeing what's happening to the original scratch. Is it diminishing, disappearing? What's going on? So if I realize that it's not going away enough and I feel that it's safe enough to do more aggressive polishing, I'm going to either hold the buffer in that position longer, I'm going to use more pressure, I'm going to lift up on the edge higher, whatever. So that's where you may wonder or question like, hey, I wonder why Darren, he was so consistent here and then suddenly he went back and forth here. Well, that's because I'm still seeing the scratch that I don't want, and I'm going to see if I can diminish it even further with some added time behind the buffer. Now when it comes to these spot treatments, I don't overthink the setup. If I was polishing this whole car, I would have my pad washer out, because I'm going to be using this pad over and over again. But in these spot treatments, I'm just going to break out the what's called the spur, and what it does is it loosens up the fibers, breaks up the spent material, the compound polishes, and kind of freshens up the pad, put it that way. And I will do that approximately every 2 to 3 times of new applications of polish or compound. Once again, that's the only amount of compound I'm using, not a significant amount. Now, believe it or not, if you allow the tape to sit there and you polish over it long enough, there's 2 things you need to be aware of. A, you will get some transfer, because the adhesive, this will not only heat up and it will start to melt the adhesive of the tape, but as you're polishing it, it will cause, as a natural occurrence, some of the adhesive to be pushed out from the edges of this. So many guys are completely opposed to using tape. I use it very strategically, but I also accept the limitations of it. If I understand the limitations of it, I can then counter those limitations. So that's one of the limitations, is that I need to make sure that I don't get adhesive and have it make a big gummy mess or interfere with the polishing process or actually do damage. Really, in most cases, that's a non-issue, because it's going to be such a trivial amount. The second thing is I can polish away enough of this clear coat that I will actually create a tape ridge. And so I need to account for that. Now that the major work of the polishing is done, now I can just blend in. I don't know if there's truly going to be a ridge there or not. It doesn't matter at this point because I'm going to account for that ridge. And now I'm going to, if there is in fact a ridge, I'm going to blend it in. I'm also going to address this little tiny scratch, which is part of the original scratch at this point that I know I did not need to wet sand. I just need to tap it with a buffer. But this, you can burn this edge very quickly if you're not paying attention. So the amount of time, the amount of pressure, everything is reduced dramatically. Now the amount of time will seem maybe inappropriate, but what you don't know is that I'm backing off significantly of the pressure. So I will be barely allowing this to come in contact with the paint. Only enough where I'm allowing the polish to do what I need it to do. Now the reason I move so quickly back and forth is because what I'm doing is I'm constantly checking for results, because I'm trying to eliminate this little line from the tape, but I want to do it without burning the edge. So I'm going very quickly back and forth to constantly monitor and check my results. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more compound polish. Now because this is a brand new polish and I don't have enough time behind it, and this is what's considered a dark color, very prone to showing any imperfections, i.e. hologramming. So I don't want this to be an experiment car. It delivered good results. It's a good user experience. So thank you, Brian. You called and asked for an update. Here's your update in the form of a video. But I don't want to drive away because we're cloudy skies. It's not going to reveal any hologramming. I want to default to a more sure thing, and that's where I'm going to default to my DA, a specific pad, which is a finishing pad, and a polish that I know is a sure thing that will truly produce a swirl-free finish. So at this point, I have acceptable results, actually far better results than I thought. Now I'm just worried about producing a hologram-free finish. Before I proceed, I'm simply going to wipe off. As a rule, I always double check my microfibers. When it comes to this type of work, these are reserved for a very specific purpose. They have to reside in, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a virgin microfiber, these have to exist between an 8 and a 10 as far as quality and perfection. So they can only be used a few times and go through the wash a few times before they get downgraded to something else. So right now this is still acceptable based on what I'm working on, because this is what I would call probably an 8 or 9 level microfiber as far as quality goes. And by quality, what I mean is original quality. Yes, I can spend more. This is just a Costco microfiber. Many guys have an aversion to those because they think they're cheap or whatever. Well, if you don't like them, don't use them, is what I say. Now, I've got my Rupes 21 Bigfoot. That is my go-to DA buffer. I've got a Americana Global finish pad. And one of my sure things is Shoal Concepts. Now, to be very transparent with you guys, because someone on one of the videos said, oh, the reason Darren tests certain products is because he's paid to do it. Well, no, I'm not. But with that said, is Shoals did send this to me for free. I'm gonna test it. What comes out of my mouth in regards to it is gonna be unbiased, because I'm just gonna call it for what it is. I happen to love their products. They don't have to pay me to say that. They probably should pay me to say it, but they don't have to. So you could say like, oh, well, you're still biased, Darren, because they're still sending you compounds. Well, trust me, compounds and the cost of them and getting them is a complete non-issue in my world. If this costs 150 bucks, I don't care what it costs so long as it produces the results that I want it to. And if I decide that $150 for roughly, I don't even know how many ounces this is because it's made in Germany, so it's 500 grams, whatever that converts to ounces, that's probably, I don't know, 18 ounces maybe, 16 ounces. I know it's not 32, whatever. I don't even know what this costs. It's S30 plus, it's their premium swirl remover. So far, my go-to polishes as a sure thing, as a great user experience, is either Menzerna or Shoal Concepts. But I'm not paid by either company. I will tell you if and when I ever am. I am not paid, but I did get that for free. Just as a note, I have this set to number 5. I'm using medium pressure at the beginning, and in this case, medium pressure to me, if I had to guess, would be approximately 4 to 7 pounds, which based on those numbers can be pretty significant as far as a spread, but it's not a whole lot of pressure. As I work to remove the swirl marks, I'm going to back off the pressure and just back it off to the point where it's just enough to hold the pad against the panel so that I know it's doing its job. You might be noticing how I'm allowing that pad to really hover, and I'm using ample working time as I use this buffer because I want it to do what it's intended to do, which is to remove those swirl marks. And I know because this is a fine polish, it's not particularly aggressive. This pad is not particularly aggressive, and it's a DA buffer, which is far less aggressive than the Rotary. I can be far less cautious because I understand the benefits and the limitations of this machine, and I choose an appropriate response based on the canvas and the components of this. Finished the final step, which is swirl removal, hologram removal. I'm going to remove the polish. Like I said, I use the Shoal Concepts S30 plus. What do they call it? Their premium swirl remover. And now I'm just checking for results. Welcome to Tesla's automatic cars, because the key fob is close enough where it will engage if I hit the button of the door handle. So I'm impressed. I'm very happy with the results. It's not perfect. I knew I could not accomplish perfection. That's where you, as a detailer, you've got to be able to communicate that, articulate that to your customer, which is why I wanted to bring you in firsthand. Alicia is a real customer. This is a real paying customer. Real car, real money, real outdoors, my real life. None of this is fabricated. So if I don't perform and produce the results, there's going to be unwanted consequences. That's why I think it's so important to, develop your communication skills. And once again, that's why when it comes to operating a business, which is vastly different than being a driveway detailer or an enthusiast or just a part-timer, having this skill set is very different than running a business and dealing with customers, managing expectations, and very critically, actually being profitable. Because ultimately, is that not what you want to be, is profitable? And the icing on the cake would be doing something that you like doing and being profitable about it. So to me, that's the winning combination I'm after. First, understand the customer, their expectations, make sure they're making informed decisions, figuring out what's going to be a win for their world based on their world, their car, their money, their time, their end game, their objectives. How do I figure out what's going to be a win for them if I can't draw that information from them? Most people, because this is not their world, they would not know how to instruct you as a detailer what to do. You're supposed to be the professional. So that's where you have to become the leader in a diplomatic way and draw that information out from them, educate them in the process so they can make the most informed decision as possible, and you just help them along the way by informing them and letting them know the benefits and the drawbacks. It's what's called a cost-benefit analysis. What is the winning combination between the costs versus the benefits? This I accepted, and that's why I explained to my customer, it's not going to be a perfect fix, but it's a leased car. She only needs it to be good enough to live with it in the interim and then turn it in without getting hit by a big fat bill for them to fix this. Because they know that, I mean, that's the rule of leasing a car, is what you're doing is you're paying for the depreciation of it, the use, the wear and tear of it. That's actually what you're paying for. So now that this is fixed, I'm going to go around and address the other scratches, fix those, then we'll finish it up by waxing it, calling the customer back, get her reaction on camera. I think she will be pleasantly surprised and very happy with the results. But once again, this is the real world. We'll find out. Let me show you the other scratches or areas that she pointed out. We have some transfer here, which I know is going to be a combination of both scratches and transfer. I'll remove the transfer first, then deal with the scratches. We've got a scratch here that she pointed out, and then we have some scratches here. Subtle, but nonetheless scratches. These do not jump out at you. This jumps out more, so let me show you just how unique each scratch is and how I can pick different strategies to deal with it in the most efficient and effective way. Now, talk about different forms of strategy. And by the way, you keyboard jockeys, you guys crack me up, because I love how A, you're either not watching the full video and therefore you're easily able to take things out of context. B, you intentionally take things out of context. Or C, you just, I don't know, you want to be a dickwad about it and just be one of those guys. But you crack me up nonetheless. So that was a little my sidebar. Strategy here. This scratch is subtle. I know, and this is what's called the magic eraser. I know this will abrade the paint. It's a form of wet sanding, but because it's so malleable and soft, it will conform to the texture of the surface. So if there's orange peel or a scratch, it's not going to be able to shear away flat the scratch itself, but it's going to be able to diminish the edges of it, if that makes sense. It will also remove the transfer here, and it's going to do the same thing here as far as diminish the edges of the scratch. That's all I'm looking for because these scratches are so minor. I want to cut to the chase. It wasn't a huge issue for the customer because she says, hey, if it doesn't take too long, which is code for if it doesn't add too much more money to the original job, and I've got all my equipment out, go for it. So I'm going to take my all-purpose cleaner. This is not Griot's Garage, just so you know. It's only their container. I like the container because it just is appealing and it looks professional. And I just fill it with my own all-purpose cleaner. which there's endless all-purpose cleaners. Once again, there'll be links below my video, and it will show you the ones that I prefer based on your world. Are you a professional that's going to be going through large quantities, or are you a driveway detailer or enthusiast that are going to be going through minimal quantities? There is a difference there. If you're a driveway detailer, you may not want to buy a whole gallon of concentrate that can essentially make 100 gallons or 50 gallons or 5 gallons. You may just want a small amount. Anyhow, so what I'm doing is I'm using the magic eraser. This tool, and I call it a tool, very effective for cleaning, but you have to understand it will abrade any surface except glass and metal, I suppose. Even metal, it will eventually wear chrome off of metal, chrome plating. How do I know that? Because I use it in the bathroom, and now the chrome is beginning to disappear off of some of the fixtures. So when used over time with enough pressure, it will abrade and do some damage. But once again, so does wet sanding. But I know how to fix it, and in this moment, it's an appropriate choice because it will allow me to produce the results that I want in a shorter period of time that I want. So I'm becoming more efficient while remaining effective. Because this is so close to an edge, character line, label it how you want. I'm going to practice safe polishing, and I'm going to use the Rotary, which is going to remove these abrasions very quickly. And I'm going to use the Rotary because I would still want to be aggressive with the compounding. This area here, there's 3 areas here, here, and there. Because this is mostly transfer and just the subtlest of scratches, I'm not going to tape this off. I'm just going to tap it with the Rotary because that will be sufficient enough to just remove the abrasions that were put in there from the magic eraser. Same Rotary, same pad, same speed setting, which I've now dialed it back up to 3, which is 1200 RPM. Same initial cut, which is the last cut by Jace Price. So far it gets a thumbs up, it performs, it's got a good user experience. I've got my character lines or edges taped off for safety. You'll notice on that, once again, I lift it up on the edge because I want to essentially force the process, cut to the chase. It's such a small area. Now I've just diminished the edges on the scratch. It's not removed 100%, but now it basically is like an embossed or a little valley that looks exactly like the same paint color, meaning it's not showing up as a white scratch. Now I can just add a subtle more amount of compound, tap this little area where I abraded the paint with the magic eraser. And I maintain the edge the whole time on that one because even if I went flat, because the curvature of this panel is going to limit my ability to hold it flat against the panel itself anyways. So once again, I'm not going to overthink that moment. Now that I have done the heavy lifting with the Rotary polisher, the wool pad, time to move on to the fine tuning. The DA, same polish, Shoal Concepts S30 Plus, premium swirl remover, same pad, same setting as before. Because of the safety of this in relation to the Rotary, and with my experience, I'm not going to have to tape up these lines for protection. I'm just going to adjust accordingly and appropriately. There's a little bit of residue from the adhesive, wipes up pretty quickly. So a couple things there was a test that I put in there that some of you will have picked up on. I did not wipe off the compound before I introduced the swirl remover. Now, all you keyboard jockeys out there, will be a direct invitation for you to disparage Darren and call me a hack or whatever label is your choice or label du jour. Point is I know how to break the rules. There's so many ways. We do not need to overthink this process, people. This is not high-level paint correction. Kind of it is, meaning the steps and procedures are what I would use for high-level paint correction, but it's not a showpiece. It's not going to be scrutinized under various types of lighting or what have you. It's not going to be scrutinized by a customer with a highly developed trained eye. Does that mean I'm cutting corners? No. What it means is that I'm delivering the appropriate and realistic winning combination to the customer based on the information that was fed back to me, based on the questions that I asked of her. So, yes, you can break the rules. I'm now going to wipe it off, address the other scratches, move on before we actually apply any form of sealant or wax onto this car. So what I am seeing as I wipe is very good results. I myself am having to hunt for the scratch. I know it's around here somewhere. Okay, there it is, I found it. And I had to go hunting for it that much. You also notice when I was polishing, I went way out of the boundaries. Well, that's because if I work on this area, I want to make sure that I'm very thorough, so I'm going to go outside the lines of it, and I want to make sure that I blend this to a degree, so because the focus will be right here. This will be the central focal point. So if I blend it out here, and Johnny Customer looks here, but everything around it to this degree is perfect, it's kind of like fading it from white to gray. So I've created, let's say out here is black and here is white. So I've created a gray area between here and there. And it's a shades of gray that get progressively darker and darker and darker. That's just a metaphor. So I create this kind of blurred area that's not really blurred. It's just that if the focal point is here, I don't want to contain my work to a very precise area that you could actually see a line of demarcation. And I could say to the customers like, okay, that area is perfect. And then they would say like, well, yeah, but I can see exactly where you worked, Darren. That looks perfect. This doesn't look as perfect. And it's showing now. So that's why I want to blend it. Now we'll move on. This is our last area. I'm gonna try to capture this. We've got a set of vertical lines, scratches that go like this. So there's two main sets like that. Let's see if it'll capture it. So what I'm doing is, because I can grab an edge, I can feel an edge with my nail, I'm going to break out the sandpaper. Once again, it's right up next to a character line. So I'm going to protect this area, wet sand, and proceed from there. So the scratches, here's the character line. The scratches are confined to above the character line. So this doesn't really matter how thick the tape is, because all I'm worried about is protecting that character line and above it, but really the character line itself. I just have to be concerned with above this. Now, once again, my O&R solution, I believe it was 1500 grit sandpaper. Let's verify, which you should do anyways, because as you get distracted in working and you have multiple types of sandpaper, because it's happened to me, I thought I was reaching for 1,000, or I'm sorry, I thought I was reaching for 3,000. I started to sand and thought, oh, wait a minute, I didn't double check, and realized it was in fact 1,000 grit. Very different. So this has a natural curvature to it. I can mold this pad, because it's malleable, to actually conform very precisely into this curvature of this body panel. And the customer told me, because this was so far down south on the body panel, that you would have to almost get on your knees to see it. she was kind of hesitant of like, oh, well, how much more is that going to cost? Those weren't her exact words, but this is once again that cost benefit analysis. Hey, I'm already here. You can see them. It is a lease. Every lease return is different. I've already got all the equipment and tools out, so this could be a 10-minute moment. Yes, I can charge her more now that I'm doing some additional work, but it's a good ROI, a good return on investment. My investment for me is time. Time is money, her results. So that's the cost benefit analysis. I'm just doing a small amount of wet sanding to break down the edges of those scratches. You can see the abraded area right here. Maybe the scratches will even show up more, but they're still going on, which I knew they would. I'm not looking for perfection on this once again. I'm just looking to either camouflage them so you really can't see them or diminish them as much as possible. So this is my working area. As I polish, I'm always going to go outside the boundaries of that working area. First with the Rotary, it's going to go out a little ways. Then with the DA, it's going to go out even further. Now, once again, same process. Rotary first for the heavy lifting to remove the sanding marks. And it would help if I plugged it in. One extension cord, 2 different buffers. Because this has a natural curvature to the panel, even if I were to hold this flat, it would still rest upon this edge and on this upper panel, and there'd be a gap in between here where there'd be far less pressure. So I'm going to have to use this strategically in order to use this part of the pad in order to get it into this natural curvature. And you'll notice I got a little sling on the panel, and that was just me being a little hasty. Since I did go up on the edge, and I am pretty certain I put in some decent hologramming, my finished pass with this, if you think about it, this panel is flat till the very end. This pad is flat till the very edge. So naturally, if I hold it flat here, and I've got some compound on this edge or along here, it's actually going to be a perfect fit. And that's what I was doing, is trying to remove any deeper hologramming that I put into the paint before I attack it with the DA. And if you're wondering why I didn't tape up this edge, because it would appear from that angle that I'm actually going over that edge. In fact, I'm not. I'm very aware of it. Once again, detailing is like the height of awareness, like a lot of jobs. I'm not even going over that. It just appears as though I am. And if the buffer literally went over it, I know that I'm tilting it so that it's not even doing anything to this edge at all. Hence why I did not bother to tape it up. Once again, spot treatment, you kind of go ghetto status, where you don't really apply all the normal rules. One of the rules is I always check my pad, because like you saw, it was laying like that. That's a big no-no as a rule. But as a rule, I always check my pads before I introduce the pad to the panel, or even introduce polish to the pad itself. So is this a sure thing, feeling it with my hand? No, it's not. But because I know the processes of my pads, how they're kept, how they're dropped or not dropped, all the variables as a rule, and based on the larger picture of this moment. I'm not going to overthink it, but I am still going to apply appropriate caution. I removed the tape. Now my goal is to blend in the overall area. I don't have to worry about the edges nearly as much as I did with the Rotary. So now it's all about finishing it up, fine polishing, removing any hologramming. Okay, very pleased with the results that I'm seeing. I'm going to take my microfiber, take the polish off. Once again, I broke the rules. I did not remove my compound before I introduced the polish. Part of the reason I like to break the rules is to not only mock the industry and the forums, because there's all these guys that want to make, as the saying goes, a mountain out of a molehill. They want to embellish everything and make it much more special or unique or difficult as possible so they look like a bigger expert in the room, I guess. The problem I have with that is that it confuses beginners. I used to be a beginner. That would be very frustrating to me. I grew up in this industry before there was YouTube or the internet or any of the technology that we have today. You literally had to figure it out on your own. There wasn't any formalized training, 30 years ago. If there was, it was so obscure I didn't know about it because once again, I couldn't jump on my desktop computer, do a Google search. Google wasn't around. Google wasn't there to answer questions for me. So I also do it to show how much flexibility there really is when it comes to virtually anything. You can go off label, go off the reservation, go off the trail, but that's where experience comes in, and that's part of why I break the rules, is to show you that, hey, learn the rules, then learn to break them. But also that remember that there's everyone's got an agenda. I just try to be as transparent as possible with my agenda because one of my mission statements is to develop trust at every level. Whether it's with you guys or my customers, that's one of my mission statements. So, and that's a principle-centered way of operation, which means if there's ever hesitation, if I'm feeling weak and tired and I want to take shortcuts, if I question like, oh, I wonder if a customer would want me to do this or that, it's like, well, I default to the principle. The principle is, will my action develop trust or will it diminish trust? So that's why I believe in complete transparency with my customers and you guys and being as candid as possible. So with that being said, is the internet is filled with endless opinions. One of the greatest challenges, well, let me illustrate both the benefits and challenges. One of the benefits of this information era that we're in is information overload, is what I call it. Too much information, too many opinions. When you're presented with too many choices, naturally, being a human, you will be frozen with anxiety. You will be overwhelmed with choices. You will not take action. If you take no action, you will receive no feedback, positive or negative feedback. If you're receiving no feedback, you will not know how to proceed moving forward. So negative feedback is as good as positive feedback. So one of the greatest challenges will be how to filter out the noise and tune into the signal. Signal is where you want the signal. Like in the old days when our TV screens, the signal was getting interrupted, we'd have to beat the side of our TV, adjust the antenna so that we would get the signal more clearly and filter out the noise or the static. So there's a lot of static out there, there's a lot of noise, endless opinions. Who do you trust? How do you verify? It's very difficult. I get it. It's real and it's significant. So that's part of why I break the rules, is to demystify this area of detailing. Show you that in fact there's many ways to get to the end result, kind of debunk a lot of myths out there, whatever. So that's part of why I break the rules. That, and I just naturally am kind of mischievous and I just like to stir the pot. When you stir the pot and you start pushing people's buttons, it reveals who they are as a person. I also enjoy that observation. So with that said, I like the results. I've now completed, I want to see if I can capture as much of this scratch or the finished product. The scratches are right there. They're still visible, but now instead of showing up as white lines, they're just gonna show up as like marks in the paint, like embossed, as in impressions into the paint. Little valleys that do not show up as white lines, but show up as blue lines, but you have to go hunting for them. So once again, here they are. We'll see how closely we can zoom in to see the lines. And once again, I never know what's gonna show up on video. So here is the normal viewing perspective, which I cannot see them at all. Okay, what is it called? LSP, last salute. I don't remember what LSP stands for. It stands for something to do with your last final step. Last step product, I think is what it stands for. So after the polishing, waxing, everything, I just want to further enhance it, double check my work. What I have is Finish Care Extra Slick Final Body Shine. This stuff is amazing. So I'm just going to clean up any residual polish, compound, waxes, sealants, endless terms, often used interchangeably, which only adds confusion to an already very confused industry and already very confused people. I feel your pain. Once again, it's real and it's significant. Going to wipe the seams of the car, the door jambs, because I know that some of the polish will have gotten in there. I do one last final inspection, and yes, it reveals exactly what I thought it would. I'm going to go around and hit my other spots. So Haley, why don't you, know where the scratch was. Okay, here's one of them. You can zoom in. It goes like this, or it did go like this, and then there was one down here somewhere. Oh, it's right here, right there. Who knows if it'll show up. We had the one at the corner down here. We had the one right here. So we have here, down here, and once again, this is approximately 1.5 feet distance. At best, someone's going to look at it this closely. Most cases, they're going to look at it from up here, what I call normal viewing distances, especially women. Women don't like to get up and down and do this thing. So they're going to look at it like this, and it's going to be like, damn, Darren, I can't see it at all. And that will be the winning words that I want to come out of my customer's mouth. We'll see what happens. We're gonna finish cleaning this up because there's just dust and whatever on it, and then maybe I'll convince the customer to get back on camera, and you can see the candid response that comes directly out of her mouth.